Director Emma Thompson pulled her hoodie closer as she walked through the busy halls of Heathrow Airport. The morning was cold and grey, just like her mood after 3 sleepless nights in Scotland. Her secret mission had been successful, but now she just wanted to get home to her daughter. Emma looked like any other tired traveller. Her jeans were wrinkled, her sneakers were old, and her phone had died hours ago. She carried a small backpack and moved quietly through the crowds, trying not to draw attention to herself. For 20 years, Emma had served her country with honor. She had worked her way up from a junior analyst to become the first black woman to lead Britain's most important security service. She had faced discrimination before, but she had always believed that her hard work and dedication would speak for themselves. Officer James Mitchell was having the worst day of his career. His supervisor had been angry about missed security checks. Passengers had been rude to him all morning, and his coffee had gone cold hours ago. When he saw Emma walking through the terminal, something in his tired mind triggered an alarm he didn't even understand. She looks suspicious. He whispered to his partner, Officer Robert Clark. Clark looked over and nodded. Both men had been trained to spot potential threats, but today their training was clouded by stress and unconscious bias. They saw a young black woman in casual clothes, walking alone, and their minds jumped to conclusions. "Excuse me, Miss," Officer Mitchell called out as he approached Emma. "We need to check your bag." Emma stopped immediately and turned to face them with a polite smile. She had dealt with security procedures thousands of times in her career. "Of course, officer. Is there a problem?" "Just routine," Mitchell replied, but his tone was harsh and unfriendly. "Open your bag, please." Emma set her backpack down and began to unzip it. "I'm happy to cooperate. I'm actually a government official, so I understand security is important." As she reached into her jacket pocket to get her identification, Officer Clark stepped forward quickly. "Keep your hands where we can see them," he said firmly, his voice rising. Emma's heart sank. She had seen this look before, felt this tension before, despite all her years of service, despite all the times she had protected these very people. She was being treated like a criminal simply because of the color of her skin. "I'm just trying to get my identification," Emma said calmly, keeping her hands visible. "I'm Director Emma Thompson of the National Security Service. If you could just let me show you my credentials." But the officers weren't really listening. They had already made up their minds about who they thought she was. In their stressed and biased state, they couldn't see past their assumptions to recognize the truth standing right in front of them. "We'll be asking the questions here," Clark said, moving closer. "You need to come with us for questioning." Emma felt the familiar weight of injustice settling on her shoulders. Round them, other passengers were beginning to notice the commotion. Some stopped to watch. Others whispered to each other, and a few began reaching for their phones. "Officers, please," Emma said, her voice still calm but with a note of sadness. "I've been serving this country for 20 years. I've dedicated my life to protecting everyone in this airport. I'm not your enemy." Mitchell and Clark exchanged glances. Something in Emma's voice, something in her dignity and composure, made them pause for just a moment. But they had gone too far to back down now. Their pride and their assumptions had created a wall between them and the truth. Emma thought about her daughter, about all the young people who looked like her and dreamed of serving their country. She thought about these officers' families, about how they probably weren't bad people, just people who had lost their way in a moment of pressure and prejudice. "I understand you're doing your job," Emma said quietly, "but I'm asking you to listen. To me, really listen. I'm not who you think I am." The crowd round them was growing larger. A young woman named Lucy Williams had started recording on her phone. Unable to believe what she was seeing, An elderly man named David Brown was shaking, his head in disgust at the officer's behavior. Emma stood there with quiet dignity, not angry, but deeply sad. She had hoped that her years of service, her dedication to protecting everyone in this country, would somehow shield her from this kind of treatment. But she realized now that her real job was just beginning. The situation was about to change. Everything for everyone involved. The sound of heavy boots echoed through the terminal as 3 more security officers hurried toward the growing commotion. Emma Thompson watched them approach, her heart heavy with the knowledge that this situation was spiraling beyond anyone's control. She had handled international crises, terrorist threats, and diplomatic emergencies, but nothing had prepared her for this moment of personal humiliation. The crowd round them had grown from a few curious onlookers to nearly 30 people. Some were angry, others were confused, and many were simply shocked by what they were witnessing. Emma could feel their eyes on her, and she knew that every word she spoke, every gesture she made, would be remembered and judged. "Please, I need to speak with your supervisor," Emma said quietly to Officer Mitchell, her voice barely audible above the murmur of the crowd. "This is all a misunderstanding that can be cleared up very quickly." Officer Mitchell's face was red with embarrassment and anger. He had called for backup, and now his colleagues were watching him handle what should have been a simple security check. He felt trapped by his own actions and couldn't see a way out without losing face. "We'll be asking the questions here, officer," Clark replied, his voice growing louder and more aggressive. "You need to come with us for questioning right now." Lucy Williams, a 25-year-old teacher from Manchester, held her phone steady as she recorded the entire scene. She had been waiting for her flight to visit her parents when she noticed the commotion at first. She thought it was just another routine security check. But as she watched the woman's calm and dignified responses, she realized something was very wrong. The woman being questioned seemed so composed, so educated, so clearly not the type of person who would cause trouble in an airport. Lucy had seen enough videos of police misconduct to recognize the signs, and her heart broke for this stranger who was being treated so unfairly. Emma's mind raced as she tried to figure out how to de-escalate the situation. She thought about her 15-year-old daughter, Sarah, who was probably at school right now, proudly telling her classmates about her mother's important job. She thought about all the young people who looked like her and dreamed of serving their country, and how this moment might destroy their faith in justice. But she also thought about the officers' families. Officer Mitchell probably had children at home who loved him. Officer Clark might have a wife who was proud of his service. These weren't evil men, just people who had lost their way in a moment of pressure and prejudice. "I understand you're doing your job," Emma said, her voice steady and kind despite the circumstances. "But I'm asking you to listen to me. I'm Director Emma Thompson of the National Security Service. I've been serving this country for 20 years, protecting the same people who are watching us right now." The officers exchanged nervous glances. Something in Emma's voice, something in the way she spoke about service and protection, made them pause. She didn't sound like someone trying to talk her way out of trouble. She sounded like someone who genuinely cared about their country and its people. Officer Mitchell felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. The woman's composure was unsettling him. Most people would be angry or frightened by now, but she seemed more sad than anything else. It was as if she had expected this to happen, as if she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. But they had gone too far to back down now, with all these people watching, with their colleagues standing nearby. Admitting they had made a mistake would mean admitting they had acted on prejudice rather than evidence. An older passenger, Mr. David Brown, a retired teacher from Liverpool, had been watching the scene with growing disgust. He had lived through the civil rights movements of the 1960s and had hoped that his grandchildren would grow up in a more just world. Seeing this dignified woman being treated so poorly reminded him of darker times, he thought. Britain had left behind. "I think you should listen to her," Mr. Brown said quietly, stepping forward despite his 70-year-old legs shaking with emotion. "She's been nothing but respectful and cooperative. This isn't right." His words carried the weight of decades of experience and moral authority. Other passengers began to nod in agreement. And Emma felt a small spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this situation could still be resolved peacefully. The moment hung in the air like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Emma stood there with quiet dignity, surrounded by strangers who were slowly beginning to understand that they were witnessing something much bigger than a simple security check. They were watching a test of their society's values, and everyone present would have to decide which side of history they wanted to be on. The next few minutes would change everything for everyone involved. Helen Foster had been sitting in her office on the 3rd floor of Heathrow Airport, reviewing security reports when she noticed something unusual on the monitor. One of the security cameras showed a large crowd gathering near Gate 15, and she could see several officers surrounding someone. After 25 years of working in airport management, Helen had developed a sixth sense for trouble. Something about the situation didn't feel right. The crowd was too big, too tense, and the officers seemed more agitated than usual. Helen grabbed her radio and hurried toward the elevator, her years of experience telling her that this was about to become a much bigger problem than anyone realized. As she rushed through the terminal, Helen could hear the murmur of voices growing louder. Passengers were pulling out their phones, taking pictures and videos. Some were shaking their heads in disgust. Others were whispering to each other about what they were seeing. The atmosphere was charged with tension and disbelief. When Helen finally pushed through the crowd, she saw the scene that had been unfolding for the past 20 minutes. 2 officers were standing over a black woman in casual clothes, while several other security personnel formed a circle round them. The woman stood with incredible composure, her hands visible, her voice calm despite the obvious stress of the situation. As Helen approached the crowd, she saw Emma's face clearly for the first time. Helen's heart stopped beating for a moment. She blinked hard, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her, but there was no mistake. She recognized that face immediately from the news coverage just last month when Emma had been honored by the Prime Minister for her outstanding service to the country. Helen had watched the ceremony on television, feeling proud that Britain had such capable leaders. She remembered thinking how impressive Emma Thompson looked as she shook hands with the Prime Minister. How confident and dignified she appeared as she accepted the nation's highest honor for public service. ICE officers stepped back immediately, Helen commanded as she rushed forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been managing crisis situations for decades. Officer Mitchell turned around, confused and slightly annoyed by the interruption. His face was flushed with stress and embarrassment. "Ma'am, we're handling a security situation here. Please step back and let us do our job." Helen's mouth went dry as the full reality of what was happening hit her. She looked at Emma again, then at the officers, then back at Emma. The woman who had been treated like a criminal for the past 20 minutes was one of the most important people in British government. "That's Director Emma Thompson," Helen said, her voice filled with shock and concern. "She's the head of the National Security Service." The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. The color drained from both officers' faces as if someone had pulled a plug. Officer Mitchell's mouth fell open, and Officer Clark took a step backward, his hands trembling. The crowd fell completely silent. Even the background noise of the busy airport seemed to fade away. Lucy Williams, who had been recording everything on her phone, kept the camera running, but her hands were shaking so badly that the image bounced up and down. Some passengers gasped audibly. Others covered their mouths in shock. The few people in the crowd had recognized Emma earlier, but hadn't spoken up, and now they felt guilty for their silence. The weight of what they had all witnessed was beginning to sink in. Emma stood there with quiet dignity, not angry, but deeply sad. She had hoped that years of service, her dedication to protecting everyone in this country, would somehow shield her from this kind of treatment. But she realized now that a real job was just beginning. This moment wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been judged by their appearance rather than their character. "Thank you, Helen," Emma said softly, her voice carrying across the silent terminal. These officers were doing what they thought was right. "We all make mistakes." Officer Clark's legs felt weak, and he had to lean against a nearby pillar to keep from falling. He had just treated one of the most important people in British security like a common criminal. The weight of what he had done, the realization of how his prejudice had clouded his judgment, began to crush him from the inside. Officer Mitchell stared at Emma in horror, understanding for the first time that his actions had not only hurt an innocent person but had also embarrassed his entire department. He thought about his own children at home and wondered what they would think of their father when this story inevitably reached the news. The truth had finally emerged, but everyone present knew that the real story was just beginning. The silence in the terminal was broken by a sound that no one expected. Officer Clark's knees hit the hard floor with a dull thud as he collapsed in front of Emma. His uniform, which had made him feel so powerful just moments before, now felt like a costume that no longer fit. His hands shook uncontrollably as he looked up at the woman he had wronged so deeply. "Director Thompson, I'm so sorry," Clark stammered, his voice cracking with emotion. "I don't know what came over me. Please forgive me. I have children at home, and I don't know how I'm going to explain this to them." The sight of a grown man in uniform on his knees sent shockwaves through the crowd. Some passengers looked away, uncomfortable with the raw display of remorse. Others leaned forward, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Officer Mitchell watched his partners break down and felt his own composure crumble. The weight of their actions hit him like a physical blow. He thought about his wife, who had always been proud of his work. He thought about his teenage son, who looked up to him as a hero. How could he face them knowing what he had done? Tears began streaming down Mitchell's face as he joined Clark on the ground. "We've made a terrible mistake," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We let our fears control us instead of treating you with the respect you deserved. You've spent your life protecting people like us, and we repaid you with suspicion and cruelty." The crowd watched in stunned silence. Some people were filming, others were crying, and many were simply trying to process what they were seeing. This wasn't how these situations usually ended. There was no shouting, no violence, no dramatic confrontation. Instead, there was something much more powerful: genuine remorse and the possibility of real change. Emma looked down at these two men, both fathers, both trying to do their jobs, both human beings who had lost their way in a moment of pressure and prejudice. She could see the genuine pain in their eyes, the real understanding of what they had done wrong. In that moment, she made a choice that would define not just this encounter, but the rest of their lives. Instead of anger, Emma felt something else entirely: compassion. She had every right to be furious, to demand their jobs, to make them pay for their actions. But Emma Thompson had not become one of Britain's most respected leaders by choosing revenge over redemption. "Please stand up," Emma said gently, her voice soft but clear enough for everyone to hear. "Both of you, please stand." She extended her hand to Officer Clark, helping him to his feet with the same care she might show her own daughter. Then she did the same for Officer Mitchell, her actions speaking louder than any words could. The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing. Many had expected anger, demands for justice, or at least a harsh lecture. Instead, they were witnessing grace in action. "I want you to know something," Emma said, her voice carrying across the terminal with quiet authority. "I'm not upset because of who I am or what position I hold. I'm upset because of how you treated me as a human being. Every person who walks through this airport, every traveler, every worker, every visitor, deserves dignity and respect." Lucy Williams, who had been recording everything on her phone, found herself crying as she continued to film. She had never seen anything like this. She had expected to capture a story of injustice, but instead she was witnessing something much more profound. The power of forgiveness to transform even the most difficult situations. This moment, Emma continued, looking not just at the officers, but at the entire crowd. "Can either divide us or help us grow. We can let it make us more suspicious of each other, or we can use it to build bridges. I choose growth. I choose to believe that good people can learn from their mistakes." Officer Clark wiped his eyes, his voice still shaking as he spoke. "How can we make this right? How can we possibly make up for what we've done?" Emma smiled, and for the first time that day, it reached highs. The warmth in her expression seemed to light up the entire terminal, giving hope to everyone who saw it, by making sure this never happens to anyone else. By remembering this moment every time you interact with a traveler, by treating every person you meet with the same respect you would want for your own family. The crowd began to murmur among themselves, many wiping away tears. They had come to the airport expecting a routine day of travel, but instead they had witnessed something extraordinary: the power of human compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. 3 months had passed since that cold Tuesday morning at Heathrow Airport, but the changes that followed had spread far beyond anyone's imagination. Emma Thompson stood in the same terminal where everything had begun. But now the atmosphere was completely different. The security officers moved with a new sense of purpose, treating each traveler with genuine respect and kindness. Heathrow Airport had become a model for respectful security procedures across the entire country. Emma had worked closely with Helen Foster to create new training programs that focused on treating every traveler with dignity, regardless of their appearance, background, or circumstances. What had started as a painful incident had grown into something beautiful and transformative. Officer Clark and Officer Mitchell had become the most passionate advocates for a change within the security department. They shared their story with other security teams, helping them understand how unconscious bias could cloud judgment and lead to terrible mistakes. Their honesty about their own failures had made them powerful teachers. "I used to think I wasn't prejudiced," Officer Mitchell told a training session filled with security officers from across London. "I thought because I wasn't actively hateful, I was free from bias. But I learned that we all have blind spots, fears and assumptions that we don't even realize we carry. The key is being willing to see them and change." His words carried weight, because everyone in the room knew his story. They had all heard about the day he had treated one of Britain's most important security officials like a criminal. But instead of hiding from his mistake, Mitchell had chosen to learn from it and help others avoid the same error. Lucy Williams had shared a video on social media, where it had been viewed millions of times. But more importantly, she had started a community group in Manchester that brought together people from different backgrounds to share stories and build understanding. The group met every week in a local community centre, and what had begun with 12 people had grown to over 200 regular participants. That day at the airport changed my life. Lucy often told new group members, I realized that just watching injustice happen isn't enough. We all have to be part of the solution. Emma stood before a room full of airport security officers from across the country. Representatives from Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, and dozens of other cities had come to learn about the new training program. She looked out at their faces, seeing the same mix of pride and uncertainty that she had once felt when starting her own career. Every person you meet is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's hope for the future. Emma told them, her voice warm and encouraging. When we remember that, when we truly see the humanity in each traveler, we can't help but treat them with love and respect. The program had been so successful that it was being adopted by airports around the world. Emma had received calls from officials in France, Germany, the United States, and even Australia, all wanting to learn how Heathrow had transformed its security culture so completely. But for Emma, the real victory was smaller and more personal. Last week, she had walked through the same terminal where it all began. She was dressed casually again, returning from another mission, when she saw a familiar face. Officer Clark was there, monitoring the security checkpoint where their first encounter had taken place. When he saw her, he didn't just nod professionally or look away in embarrassment. Instead, his face lit up with a genuine smile, and he walked over to greet her. "Good morning, Director Thompson," he said warmly. "I hope you have a wonderful day." It was a simple greeting, but it carried the weight of transformation in those few words. Emma could hear the growth of a man who had learned from his mistakes and become better because of them. She could see the respect in his eyes, not just for her position, but for her as a human being. "Thank you, Officer Clark," Emma replied, smiling back. "You have a wonderful day, too." As she continued through the terminal, Emma thought about her daughter, who was now 16 and more proud than ever of her mother's work. She thought about all the young people who would walk through those doors in the future, travelers of every color and background who would find a world just a little bit kinder, a little bit more understanding. The training program had spread to schools, police departments, and businesses across the country. The simple message that every person deserves dignity and respect had touched thousands of lives and changed countless interactions for the better. Emma smiled as she boarded her flight, knowing that sometimes the greatest changes begin with the smallest acts of courage and forgiveness. What had started as one of the most painful experiences of her life had become one of the most meaningful, proving that even our darkest moments can be transformed into light for others.